Hello, sir.
Sir.
Audible? I'm Ashish, fifth year student at Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. So my question is, one very prominent thing we see in the discourse of Kashmir is demonization of security forces. So as a Kashmiri minority, how do you see the role of security force in Kashmir? Thank you.
See, demonization of security forces is widespread and prevalent. But primarily because it is the security forces that do not allow you to descend into anarchy. And it is these security forces who distinguish us between a state like India and a state like Pakistan. Within the first 3-4 days of trouble, when Burhan Wani was killed in an encounter, the total number of incidents that took place was about 620 odd. And in 620 incidents, the total casualty were about 1100 or so. Anywhere in the world, this is the lowest ratio for injury to incidents. In total number of injuries over 2 months, which crossed about 10,000, more than half were security forces. This is unprecedented anywhere in the world. Now, those security forces who take such blows, who soak in such punishment in order to observe restraint, they earn a good name for you. And you demonize them. If you demonize security forces, you actually weaken the will of a state to survive. Especially a state which you are targeted through your jihadi onslaught. You demonize the security forces, you are actually corroding the sword arm, the shield, the scabbard of that state. So they are going for our jugular. And we need to understand why.
Next question.
I didn't have a question. I just want to add something to what you said. There is a connection between Tamil Nadu and Kashmir. A saint born in Sri Perumbudur, which is 50 kilometers from here, Ramanujacharya, he, in his evolution of knowledge, he says, when I want to write my explanation on Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita, I have to go to Kashmir because the Pandits are sitting there. So he goes from Sri Perumbudur, which is Chennai really, all the way to Sharda Peetha. And so there is that connection and it's recorded. So I'm really glad that... just one more point. Similar thing to what happened to Kashmir has also happened in Goa, right? There, of course, it was Portuguese people, and some of those stories are very similar. Yes. What happened to the temples, how the people were treated. Yes. So there is that parallel also.
The Goan Inquisitions, yes. What he mentioned, I'm reminded of another visitor from Tamil Nadu. His name was Madhuraj Yogi. He, after hearing the fame of Abhinav Gupta, travels all the way up to Kashmir to meet Abhinav Gupta. And then when he writes about him, 2 short sentences, he says, what every other scholar says is as if written on water. What Abhinav Gupta says is as if written on heart, is how he describes Abhinav Gupta and his intellect. His name was Madhuraj Yogi. He traveled all the way up from Madurai in Tamil Nadu to Kashmir. There are other exchanges. There's a poet called Bilhana who wrote Chaur Panchashika, who also wrote some of the most cherished poetry in Sanskrit. There was a Vikramank Dev Charit he wrote, Bilhana. He was from Kashmir. He came and worked in the court of Krishna Devaraya, Chalukya kings. So Kashmir and rest of the country or South India had great connection and vibrant intellectual exchange. And I cite these examples only to, nail the lies that Kashmir belongs to Central Asia and India has nothing to do with that state. I keep coming across some absolute lies. Kashmir is unimaginable without India, and India is unimaginable without Kashmir.
Last question.
Asking, there is a lot of Sikhs also in Kashmir. What was the role of Sikhs during the exodus of this Kashmiri country?
Extremely important and good question. These Sikhs came to Kashmir when Maharaja Ranjit Singh liberated Kashmir from Pathans. The sixth Guru, Chhati Padshahi, had also come to Kashmir. There is a Gurdwara to his memory. Now, people ask me, there were about 60,000 Kashmiris, Sikhs, when more than almost 500,000 Kashmiri Hindus had to flee Kashmir. Why didn't Sikhs flee Kashmir? Those who know would realize in 1990s, Khalistan movement was at its peak. In 84, Operation Blue Star had happened, which triggered this movement. And the most virulent phase was, and we had to flee Kashmir in 1990, so just 6 years later. At that time, Pakistan was funding and fomenting both the militancies. The Sikh terrorists of Babar Khalsa and Dal Khalsa were being trained virtually in the same camps. Punjab militancy preceded Kashmir militancy. And therefore Sikhs were considered as assets in Kashmir. They thought that Punjab and Kashmir, geographical continuity, these two agitations will support each other, they'll become force multipliers, and therefore Sikh population in Kashmir is not hostile population. Two, it was not as spread out as Hindus of Kashmir were. So they were betting on the tenuous patriotism of Sikhs, especially much fewer in numbers, and that too confined to few pockets, and they didn't touch those Sikhs in the hope that, in the eventuality of Khalistan movement becoming stronger, Kashmir and Punjab will rise together against the Indian Union. But when Clinton came in 2000, in order to send a message to the American president that there is a problem called Kashmir, they killed 38 Sikhs in the Sikh village of Chhati Singhpura. When Clinton was here in Delhi, they committed that massacre in Kashmir. There is no love lost between the two. And I must tell you, and I keep telling this to whoever cares to listen. In 1671, when Mughals ruled Kashmir, very often people say that Sufis have contributed a great deal. Sorry, that was the reign of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was helped into annexing the kingdom, the throne, by Naqshbandis who were Sufis. These Naqshbandis favored Aurangzeb over his brother Dara Shikoh, who was an eclectic Sufi himself, who was a great scholar of Sanskrit, who translated Indian scriptures into Persian, who studied them in Srinagar, in Kashmir. There is a place called Pir Mahal above Chashma Shahi where he used to stay. He was beheaded by Aurangzeb and his head was gifted to his father, Shah Jahan, in Agra as a birthday gift by Aurangzeb. That Aurangzeb, when applauded by Naqshbandi Sufis to start the proselytization of India, to start the conversions in India, he said, where do we start? The best place to start is Kashmir. So his governor of Kashmir then, his name was Iftikhar Khan. When he started an extremely virulent program of conversion, my ancestors, led by Kripa Ram Dutt, came in a jatha to Anandpur Sahib. the town which was built by Guru Tegh Bahadur. Guru Tegh Bahadur was told that please save the Janayu and Tilak in Kashmir. He says, what happened? He says, this is what the Mughaliya Sultanate wants. He says, go tell the Nawab, why do you go after individual conversions? You convert our Guru, all of us will convert. So Guru Tegh Bahadur was taken prisoner at Sirhind. He refused to convert. He was brought to Delhi. His choicest, chosen, dearest disciples were cut to pieces in front of his eyes. Bhai Matidas, Bhai Satidas, he refused to budge. Then he himself was beheaded. It is this beheading of the 9th Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, for the sake of Kashmiri Pandits, that led Guru Gobind Singh to create Khalsa. And Sikhs were born out of this. We owe our existence. I don't know whether my ancestors would have remained Hindus, would have continued to wear Janayu and Tilak, had this supreme sacrifice by the 9th Guru not been made. So, betting on Sikhs to be a 5th column in this country and helping Kashmir is wrong. But at that time, a lot of people went mad. So they thought that they could count on this segment and they didn't touch them. That's the reason they stayed back.